The lights inside the Jimmy Kimmel Live studio burned brighter than usual. The crowd was loud, excited, and ready to see one of Hollywood's most beloved stars. Keanu Reeves had arrived, quiet.com, dressed in a simple black suit and smiling. Softly, he walked onto the stage with that familiar grace, nodding politely to the cheering audience before taking his seat across from Jimmy. Jimmy opened with charm, cracking jokes about Keanu's ageless appearance and his mysterious, quiet lifestyle. The crowd laughed and Keanu chuckled as usual. Seemed like just another harmless late-night segment. But something in Keanu's eyes said otherwise. Sharp, observant, waiting. "Keanu," Jimmy said with a smirk, "you've played assassins, messiahs, and hackers. Ever plan on joining the real world? Or are you just going to keep floating above us all like some monk with perfect hair?" The audience laughed, but Keanu didn't smile. Instead, he looked directly at Jimmy, paused, and then said, "Maybe the real world is the one that teaches us to disconnect. To value silence. To respect truth without needing to perform it." Jimmy's smile twitched, unsure how to react. He chuckled and tried to lighten the mood. "Okay, deep thoughts with Keanu Reeves, folks." Keanu leaned in slightly. "Jimmy, what if the system we trust, media, politics, even entertainment, is just a performance? What if no one's watching anymore because they've already figured out the trick?" The studio went quieter than usual. Jimmy blinked. "That sounds heavy. You sure you're not still stuck in Matrix mode?" Keanu didn't laugh. "You remember the Jakarta riots in 1998? That caught Jimmy off guard." Barely. That was decades ago, wasn't it?" Keanu nodded. "Thousands killed, millions displaced. But more than that, secrets buried. A French journalist named Leon Marching tried to uncover it. He vanished. Later, they said he took his own life in Singapore, but he didn't." The audience was silent. No laughter. Jimmy fumbled for a response. "That's not really entertainment news." Keanu's voice was steady. "The stories they bury aren't just news, Jimmy. They're maps. They show you who's in control." There was no music, no punchline, just tension. Keanu stared at Jimmy, and Jimmy stared back, visibly shaken. "I was asked to promote my new film tonight," Keanu said, finally leaning back. "It's about silence, systems, and truth." "But truth doesn't work in silence, does it?" The director made a quick signal off camera. The camera panned away. Jimmy smiled awkwardly and said, "We're going to cut to a quick break with Keanu when we return." But they never returned. The broadcast ended early, 7 minutes early. The online version was pulled. The rerun that night showed a different segment entirely. But it was too late. Clips of the interview had already been posted by audience members. A blurry phone video caught every word. And by midnight, Twitter was on fire. Hashtag Keanu knows, hashtag Jakarta leak, hashtag Reeves uncensored theories poured in. Journalists scrambled for information. Who was Leon Marching? Why would Keanu bring up Jakarta? What did he know? CNN and BBC aired segments the next morning. Was this just a dramatic actor making a statement or something deeper? One host asked. Others weren't so calm. An ex-CIA analyst tweeted, "If Reeves is talking about Jakarta 1998, he's either reckless or ready for war." By sunrise, the video had over 40 million views across unofficial platforms. And Keanu, he had disappeared. No press, no posts, no interviews. The world had heard him. But no one knew what he was going to say next. The city was still asleep when Eva Castillo's phone buzzed 3 times. She didn't need to look. Only one person had that signal code. Malik, he was her oldest source. A former intelligence decoder turned rogue data broker. And if he was reaching out now, it meant one thing. Keanu Reeves had started something real. Eva, a sharp-eyed investigative journalist known for her work on state-sponsored censorship, slid out of bed, and turned on her encrypted terminal. The message was short. Keanu referenced Operation Dustline. He either found the files or someone handed them to him. Red drive may still be active. We need to move. She blinked, stunned. Red drive. That was a myth. A digital vault supposedly filled with data from black-budget ops operations that never officially existed, including one tied to the Jakarta massacre. Eva picked up the phone and called her editor at the Sentinel Wire. "I want to reopen the Martian case," she said. "You're serious?" the editor asked, half asleep. "That story's dead." "Not anymore," Eva replied. "Keanu just named him on national television." Meanwhile, in a modest home outside Vancouver, Keanu stood in front of an old wooden box, unlocking it slowly. Inside were papers, cassette tapes, and a single photograph. Keanu and Leon marching in Jakarta. 1997. Smiling, alive. It had been over 25 years since Leon disappeared. The world believed he killed himself, but Keanu knew better. Leon had found something dangerous, and told Keanu just enough to make him afraid. Then Leon vanished, and Keanu began searching in silence. Quiet donations to journalists, anonymous sources, leaks to small press outfits. But none of it stuck. Until now. His choice to speak on Kimmel hadn't been spontaneous. It was planned. And the fallout was happening faster than he'd imagined. His phone rang. Blocked number. He answered without a word. "You shouldn't have said his name," a voice whispered. "They're watching." "I know," Keanu said quietly. "That's why I said it." The line went dead. In Washington, D.C., at a Department of Justice subcommittee meeting, Caroline Leavitt watched the Keanu clip for the 5th time. Her assistant hovered near the door. "It's not crazy," she said. Caroline nodded. "No, he's precise. Every word was intentional, and he gave us a breadcrumb." Her assistant looked nervous. "You think he knows about Citadel?" "Think he knows more than we do." Citadel was an open secret among the inner political circle, an unofficial intelligence network, operating with private funding and very few rules. Caroline had been building a case against them for months, linking them to financial interference in judicial appointments, but her evidence wasn't enough. If Keanu had access to Red Drive, everything could change. She reached for her encrypted tablet and typed a message. "Mr. Reeves, if you're looking for allies who won't run, I'm ready." Back in Los Angeles, Jimmy Kimmel sat in a dark conference room surrounded by 3 men in suits. One of them from the network's legal team spoke first. "We've wiped all official uploads of the segment, but audience footage is viral now. We're tracking thousands of shares by the hour." Jimmy looked drained, older than the night before. "What do they want me to do?" One of the men leaned forward. "Pretend it didn't happen." "So he was being poetic? Or call it performance art. Whatever excuse makes it go away." Jimmy shook his head. "You didn't hear him. That wasn't a performance." The man smiled coldly. "Exactly. It's the problem." Jimmy glanced toward the door. "You think he has the Martian files?" "No one's supposed to have them," the man said. "Which means if he does, we're already too late." Eva booked a flight to Paris. She needed to speak to Leon's sister, the only person who might know where his final notebooks ended up. As she closed her laptop, her screen flickered. For just a moment, her wallpaper was replaced by a red screen and a line of text. They silenced Leon. "You're next. Back off." She took a screenshot and sent it to her backup server. This wasn't just about Jakarta anymore. This was global, coordinated, and whatever Keanu had triggered on live TV, it was burning through firewalls like a virus. As the plane took off, Eva watched the clouds through the window and whispered, "Don't you dare disappear now, Keanu. We're not done." Rain hit the glass like static as Eva Castillo stepped out of Charles de Gaulle Airport. Paris was gray and tense, like it knew something was about to break. She clutched her shoulder bag tighter, scanning the terminal for familiar faces. None. That was good. She had come to meet Céline Marching, sister of the late French journalist Léon Marching, the man Keanu had named on live television. Céline hadn't spoken to press in over 20 years. Most assumed she wanted distance from her brother's conspiracy theories. But even knew better. She had read the old letters, dug through the scattered reports. Céline had never stopped investigating. She had just stopped trusting anyone. A silver car waited outside the arrival's gate. No license plate, just a single message on Ava's burner phone. Third door. Do not speak until seatbelt is on. She slid in without hesitation. The driver, silent, nodded. The car moved through the rainy streets of Paris like a ghost, winding through side roads and over bridges. Finally, they stopped at an old stone house on the edge of Montmartre. Eva stepped out into the rain, heart pounding. Céline opened the door herself. She was older now, but sharp-eyed and composed. Her voice was low and clear. "You're here." Because he finally said the name, didn't he? Eva nodded. He brought Leon back into the spotlight. Céline's lips tightened. "Then you need to see what I've been hiding. But once you do, you don't get to look away." Meanwhile, in Vancouver, Keanu sat alone in a cafe near the harbor, watching fishing boats cut through the fog. Small envelope rested beside his untouched coffee. Inside was a USB drive, handed to him hours earlier by a man he didn't know, a courier who spoke only one sentence. "She left this for you." In case the story ever returned, Keanu had already plugged it into an air-gapped laptop. The files were fragments, raw and hard to piece together. Names, codes, surveillance photos. Location pings from the late 90s, but one file stood out. Project Banyan. He opened it, heart racing. The file contained detailed plans for a joint operation between U.S. and Indonesian intelligence during the fall of Suharto's regime. Supposed humanitarian teams were used to mass covert extractions, arms shipments, and black site interrogations. Photos showed American operatives disguised as doctors and journalists. One photo, grainy, time-stamped May 1998, showed Leon Marching being dragged into a black SUV outside Jakarta. Leon had not died in Singapore. He'd never made it. That far? Keanu leaned back, breath shaking. The truth was worse than he imagined. And now, if he didn't act fast, others would be silenced, just like Leon. Back in Paris, Céline led Eva down into a cellar lined with shelves. "After they said my brother killed himself, I was visited by someone from Interpol," Céline said. "He warned me not to ask questions. But he also left me something, maybe by mistake." She handed Eva a thick file with faded stamps. Restricted internal channels only. Inside were satellite images, leaked reports, and a list of names, operatives. Journalists, even UN officials who had vanished or died between 1997 and 2000. Leon called it the Orchard, Céline whispered. Not just a black site, a system. A digital kill switch for any narrative they couldn't control. He said one day it would reboot. Maybe that's what your Mr. Reeves has done. Eva stared at the documents. This could destroy reputations, governments, ... Céline didn't blink. Good, then maybe someone will listen this time. In Washington, D.C., Caroline Leavitt walked into a closed-door meeting with her legal team. On the wall was a projection of Keanu's interview. Paused at the moment he said, "The stories they bury aren't just news." Caroline stood in front of the team. "I just spoke to a retired analyst from Belgium who confirmed the name Leon Marching appears in a sealed NATO log. And now an actor, a movie star, is putting more pressure on the system than half." The Senate combined. One of her aides spoke up. "Why would Keanu risk everything?" Caroline looked at the screen, thoughtful. "Because sometimes truth comes from the wrong mouth. And that's exactly why it works." By nightfall, the leaked footage of Leon's abduction, the one Keanu found, was already bouncing between encrypted journalist channels. Someone had uploaded it anonymously to a Swiss darknet server. Even with blurred faces and aged footage, it was undeniable. And it was only a matter of time before someone in power noticed. A new hashtag appeared. Hashtag Orchard Files, and right below it, trending fast. Jin Hall Len lives. The next morning, Eva awoke to a direct message from an unknown handle. He was killed inside. Site 17. I can prove it, but I need protection. Meet me in Geneva. She stared at the screen. The story was no longer history. It was alive and coming for everyone who had tried to bury it. The cafe in Geneva was nearly empty when Eva arrived. It was tucked between a bookstore and an embassy courtyard, the kind of place people walked past without noticing. She sat at the far corner table as instructed, facing the door with her back to the wall. She wore no makeup, her hair tied into a low braid, and her burner phone was already recording. At exactly 9:05 a.m., a man entered, late 50s, tired eyes, and a slight limp. He walked like someone who used to run. He wore no tie, no watch, just a brown coat and gloves despite the summer warmth. He sat across from her and placed a folded napkin on the table. Inside it, a flash drive. "They're watching me," he said in a voice like gravel. "So I'll make this fast. I worked logistics for Site 17 until 2004. I know what happened." "Two? Leon Marchand." Eva leaned forward. "Did he die there?" The man shook his head. "Not at first." He told her the story in fragments, eyes flicking to the window every few seconds. According to him, Site 17 was a classified interrogation site run not by the CIA officially, but by an International Council of Intelligence contractors, American, British, Indonesian, and French. They called it the Orchard, not because not because it was fertile, but because it was where bad fruit was removed. Leon was held there for over a month. They interrogated him not for what he published, but for what he hadn't. He had stumbled across Project Banyan, and worse, he had encrypted a data cache and hidden it. They wanted the password. He never gave it. They beat him, starved him, drugged him, the man whispered. In the end, he died without talking. And still, they never found the files. Ava's throat tightened. "Do you know where the files are?" "I have an idea," he said. "But you'll need someone who can get into a dead server behind NATO's firewall." He stood quickly, dropping a small card on the table. "That's the name of a former cryptographer in the Netherlands. She knows the old system, Echavault. But she won't talk to anyone except one person." "Who?" He stared at her. "Keanu Reeves." And with that, he walked out. In Los Angeles, Jimmy Kimmel was in his dressing room, staring at his reflection. Makeup had been applied, but he looked pale. The last week had aged him. Lawyers came and went. So did network executives, all telling him to keep quiet. But the audience was no longer buying silence. Every tweet he posted was met with comments like, "Where's Leon? What are you hiding? Why did you cut the interview?" His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Want to make it right? Talk to Eva Castillo. She's the only journalist not playing games." For a moment, Jimmy felt the old spark, the one he had when he started, before the politics, the sponsors, the fear. He picked up his phone and dialed. "Eva, this is Jimmy Kimmel. I think it's time we talk." Keanu was already in Amsterdam. He moved quietly, never staying anywhere more than a night. The cryptographer Eva had been told about was named Dr. Noor van Dalen, a retired Dutch intelligence specialist who disappeared from public life after blowing the whistle en masse. Surveillance 10 years earlier. He met her in a greenhouse outside the city. She was tending to orchids. "Dr. van Dalen," Keanu said softly, stepping into the sunlit room. "You don't know me, but I think you once knew Leon Marchand." She didn't turn around. "I know who you are, Mr. Reeves. I also know you've become very dangerous. I'm only trying to finish what he started." She finally looked at him, her eyes sharp. "You brought the orchard back into the light. That system was meant to be forgotten. The moment I help you, they'll know I'm active again. Then don't help me for my sake, Kiana said. Do it because truth buried alive grows stronger. She stared at him, then finally nodded. They spent the next 12 hours decrypting what was left of Leon's red drive. Noor's hands trembled as she unlocked firewalls she had helped build. Behind it, they found images, reports, and signatures, not just from Jakarta, but from Libya, Syria, Sudan. Black ops carried out under the same humanitarian covers, media laundering, disaster diplomacy, and bribery of judges through anonymous donations. One folder was marked, Carolyn Levitt, compromised. Keanu frowned. Would they track her? Noor's face darkened. Because she came too close to one of their asset pipelines. And because she's about to go public with her case, they'll bury her. Keanu reached for his phone. Then we go to her first. In Washington, Caroline stood in front of a packed press hall. Her legal team had begged her to stay quiet, but she couldn't. Not after what she'd seen in the leaked Orchard files. As the cameras rolled, she took a breath. For years, she said, I've been told to be patient. That change takes time. But truth doesn't. It either lives or it dies. Then she paused. And if they come for me next, so be it. At least now you know why. That night, the file titled Project. The rain in Washington had turned to a steady downpour by the time the black SUV pulled into the underground garage of a secured building near Capitol Hill. Keanu stepped out quietly, wearing a hooded coat and carrying a weathered leather satchel under his arm. Waiting at the elevator was Caroline Levitt. No security detail, just herself, calm and ready. They didn't shake hands. I thought you might be followed, Caroline said as they stepped inside. I was, Keanu replied. But they lost me after Detroit. The elevator doors closed. She turned to him. Do you have the files? Keanu nodded. Red drive is open. We've only begun to read what's inside. Caroline led him to a quiet office 2 floors below ground. Thick walls, no windows. On the desk was a second laptop completely offline. Beside it, a printed document with one word across the top: Citadel. I've been tracking these contractors since 2022, she said. They move funding through humanitarian fronts, fake refugee centers, election observers, peacekeeping deals, all cover. And always tied back to the same names, a network with no borders. Keanu opened his satchel and slid over Noor's decrypted files. Look at folder 3, he said. Payment logs, signatures, judge appointments. And one marked Ghost Protocol, U.S. Domestic. Caroline scrolled through, her breath catching. My judicial ethics case, they knew about it. They planted the leak to bait me into filing. She looked up. They wanted this to go public, controlled. It's just enough noise to feed division. It's not enough to change anything. They underestimated the internet, Keanu said. They didn't expect it to spread this fast. It's thousands of miles away in a windowless boardroom in Jakarta. A meeting was underway. 7 men and women sat around a long steel table. No names, no introductions, just eyes on the glowing red screen at the head of the room. A woman in a black blazer spoke first. Keanu Reeves has access to the Martian archives. Noor Van Dalen assisted. Caroline Levitt is preparing a congressional testimony based on the files. Operation Dustline has been reactivated without command. Another voice, male, low and precise. Is it time to trigger Protocol Ember? The room fell quiet. Not yet, said the oldest among them, his voice thin but firm. Silence will only feed the fire. Let them scream. Let them expose. And then we remind the world how quickly the system can swallow its enemies. The screen flashed. Initiate Citadel response, Alpha in Amsterdam. Eva Castillo was watching. The world explode. Her article, The Orchard Files, How Keanu Reeves Unmasked a Global Cover-Up, had gone live for hours earlier. Already it had been translated into 9 languages and picked up by Al Jazeera. the BBC, and the New York Times. Her servers were under constant attack, but her backups held. Emails were pouring in. Former agents, forgotten journalists, even retired UN diplomats. One message stood out. Marchang was the first. You may be the last. Meet me in Marrakesh. Bring only analog. She closed her laptop, grabbed her notebook, and booked a flight. There was no going back now. In Los Angeles, Jimmy Kimmel sat across from a CNN anchor in a stripped-down studio with no audience. No jokes this time, just one spotlight. He cleared his throat. I didn't know about Jakarta, he said. I didn't know who Leon Marchang was. But I know what I saw in Keanu's eyes that night. He wasn't performing. He was trying to tell us something that had been burning inside him for years. The anchor leaned in. Do you regret cutting the broadcast? Jimmy nodded slowly. Yes. I let fear decide what truth was safe enough to air. And now people might die because of it. That same night, Carolyn stood before a House subcommittee. Behind closed doors, no press, no cameras, just her and the committee. I am submitting 214 pages of classified documents, financial trails, and communications that suggest elements within us and allied governments have knowingly protected a covert intelligence mechanism operating outside the chain of command, known internally as Citadel. One congressman whispered, "That's treason-level information." "No," she said calmly. "Treason is letting it happen." They stared at her, silent. She knew most of them wouldn't act. But it was now on record. The truth, once spoken in rooms like this, had a strange way of leaking out, if not today, then tomorrow. Keanu returned to Vancouver by dawn. The city was still asleep. He sat at the edge of a quiet dock, watching the tide roll in, his phone beside him. No calls, no interviews. Just silence, the kind he always found meaning in, and then it buzzed. One message. From a number labeled only LM, you were right to speak. But you still haven't asked the most important question. Who funded? Banyan? Keanu stared at the screen. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then slowly he typed, I'm listening. And the war for truth entered its next phase. You said, Part 6, ChatGPT said, in Marrakesh. The air was thick with heat and dust. Eva Castillo moved through the narrow streets with a worn scarf wrapped tightly around her head. She kept her camera off, her phone powered down, and her footsteps light. She had learned long ago that the people who hide the truth don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear smiles. She reached the cafe just before sundown as instructed. A man sat alone in the corner, stirring tea he hadn't touched. His face was lined with age and sun, but his eyes were sharp, the kind that never stopped observing. You're early, he said without looking up. I had a feeling, Eva replied, sliding into the seat across from him. He handed her a small envelope. Inside was a photograph, a satellite image from 2001. A large desert compound labeled in red, Site 17, decommissioned. This place wasn't shut down, he whispered. It was relocated, and it's still operational. New name, new country. Same silence. Eva looked at him. You were part of Citadel. Long enough to know what it became. He paused. They don't kill stories. They erase the people who tell them. And Keanu just made himself their top priority. In Vancouver, Keanu Reeves walked into a quiet community theater, a place he had supported anonymously for years. The building was empty, closed for renovations, but the back room had been transformed into a temporary operations base. Carolyn Levitt was already there, pacing. Her legal team had been silenced. Two of her aides received anonymous threats. But she was still standing. We have to assume our phones are compromised, she said, and emails, even private messages. They're pushing us towards silence. Keanu nodded, then placed a small device on the table, a burner laptop, air-gapped and loaded with one final part of the red drive. Banyan Correspondence Archive, Level 5. Carolyn clicked open the top folder. Hundreds of letters. Digital. Memos, briefings, all detailing the financial architecture behind Project Banyan and the Orchard Network. But the real shock came in the funding logs. Charitable foundations. Climate research grants, even a children's education NGO. All. Laundering platforms for global black ops. And at the top of every page, the same logo. A circle of stars surrounding a tree with one word beneath. Ember. What is Ember? Carolyn asked. Keanu's voice was low. A parallel intelligence network. Created not by governments, but by corporate interests, tech giants, private security firms, energy companies. They didn't want oversight, so they made their own agency. They used Banyan to destabilize entire regions, Carolyn whispered. And now they're inside Western governments, media, courts. Ava's voice cut in through the burner phone she'd connected remotely. Ember isn't a rogue system. It's the system. Everything else is a performance. That same night, in a luxury hotel in Zurich, a private conference was underway. No press, no live streams. It's just a gathering of men and women with more wealth than nations. At the center of the room stood a sleek woman in black with a voice like glass. Our exposure is accelerating, she said calmly. The Reeves-Levitt axis has achieved what whistleblowers failed to do for years. They've humanized the conspiracy. Now people are watching. A man near the back asked, "So we apply pressure?" She shook her head. "We do better. We offer chaos, distract the public, fragment the attention, give 'em noise." Another executive spoke, and Reeves. She smiled faintly. "The internet loves him. They won't believe he's a liar. So we won't call him one. What then? We call him a legend. A tragic artist. And then we wait for him to fall." Meanwhile, across the world, something unexpected happened. A viral video surfaced, leaked from an anonymous source in military uniform. It showed aerial drone footage from 1998, an extraction team pulling hostages from a compound, including a man that looked unmistakably like Leon Marshing. Caption read, "He lived, he escaped." But they caught him again. Millions viewed it within hours. Governments issued denials. Archives were misplaced. But the image of Leon was burned into the public's mind. The myth was becoming reality. Keanu stood alone that night on the roof of the community center, staring up at the stars. The world felt fragile, like a film reel stretched too tight. Carolyn joined him silently. "You think people will believe all this?" "They already do," Keanu said. "The difference is, now they can't unsee it." She nodded. "We need to go public. Together." Before they shut it down, Ava's voice crackled again through the encrypted call. "They'll try to assassinate your character. Then your credibility. Then you?" Keanu smiled. "Let them try." And as the city lights shimmered in the distance, a single message was broadcast through hidden servers across 5 countries. The leak dropped at exactly 6 o'clock GMT. A countdown clock had been ticking for hours. Shared across thousands of devices. Mirrored on protest signs. Graffitied onto city walls from Manila to Marseille. At 0, screens worldwide flickered to life. Not from any one news outlet, but from decentralized citizen nodes and whistleblower networks. Hashtag Ember Files exploded across every platform. There were no flashy visuals, no anchors, just documents, raw, damning, undeniable. Thousands of pages showing how Project Ember had operated like a shadow government, shaping wars, elections, markets, and media. A spiderweb of funding trails linked pharmaceutical giants to regime changes, news networks to intelligence operations, and Western courts to offshore bribes. The documents revealed operational handoffs between CIA black sites and private defense firms. Diplomatic missions repurposed as transport routes, and the quiet assassinations of at least 17 journalists and whistleblowers. between 1995 and 2021, including Leon Marchand. Not a suicide, a targeted execution. Every file included metadata, sign-offs, satellite overlays. It was irrefutable. And in the center of the largest folder was a name, Keanu Reeves, not as a perpetrator, but as a containment risk level 3 following what internal emails described as public narrative disruption. In Washington, D.C., Caroline Leavitt stepped into the light. She had scheduled a public hearing, not through any House committee, but streamed openly to the public. No gatekeepers, just her. The files and truth laid bare. Behind her stood families of the missing. Former operatives, Eva Castillo, Keanu Reeves. "This is not a conspiracy theory," she said, her voice firm. "This is not about left or right. This is about systems of power that were never meant to be accountable. We have the proof. And we have the names." The live stream topped 30 million views within the first hour. Even mainstream outlets, once hesitant, began airing excerpts. Legal experts scrambled to verify. Former intelligence agents leaked more data in real time. UN observers called for emergency briefings. Keanu said nothing for most of it. But at the end, he stepped forward, eyes steady on the lens. "They told me silence was safer," he said quietly. "They said I was just an actor, that I didn't belong in this conversation. But the truth isn't about who delivers it, about whether we're willing to hear it and whether we're ready to act." Then he looked down, and if you're watching this, you've already answered that question. The response from global governments was immediate and divided. France and Brazil called for formal investigations. The UK issued a neutral statement. The U.S. Department of Defense denied all claims, calling the documents fabrications enhanced with AI manipulation. But whistleblowers kept coming forward. Embers kept igniting. In Brussels, a European Parliament member invoked the Ember files in a speech that halted trade negotiations with two nations. In Jakarta, students filled the streets demanding truth about 1998. In New York, thousands held a candlelight vigil for Leon Marchand, many born after his death. Someone placed a single photo at the base of the UN building. Leon smiling. On the back, he didn't die for nothing. But as truth spread, so did retaliation. Caroline's apartment was raided by unknown men posing as federal agents. Her legal counsel vanished for 48 hours. Ava received a severed flash drive in the mail, with her name etched into the plastic. And Keanu ... vanished. His social media went dark, his phones disconnected. Studio representatives said they hadn't heard from him in days. Rumors spiraled that he'd fled to Iceland, that he was in protective custody or worse, that Ember had taken him, until 1 week later. A live stream appeared from a hidden location. The camera focused on a quiet room. Keanu stepped in slowly. He looked thinner, paler, but calm. "I'm not here to inspire you," he began. "I'm here to remind you they counted on you forgetting. They counted on noise, fear, distraction, but not this, not all of us." He paused. "The orchard fell. Ember is next. And when it does, don't rebuild it, replace it." Then the screen went black. That same night, multiple anonymous sources confirmed that an internal Ember server, Citadel Node 4, had been wiped clean by an unknown team. Satellite pings linked the breach to Iceland. A message was found burned into the server's final frame. "Truth lives." By morning, everything had changed. Courtrooms reopened, files once sealed. Legislators were forced to respond. A new investigative body was formed, one with international oversight. Whistleblower protections were expanded. A movement had begun, not with politicians or soldiers, but with an actor, a journalist, and a name from the past, Leon Marchand. His sister Celine released a statement to the press. "My brother's voice was silenced. But his story wasn't. The truth has many messengers." I thank each of them. And somewhere in the mountains, far from the reach of screens and microphones, Keanu Reeves sat quietly beneath a tree. He had done what he could. The rest belonged to history. But for the first time in a long time, he believed history was listening.